Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze Tuchel's tactical plan against Crystal Palace and how it maximized Kai Havertz. When we break the game down and we do look at the board, it's Chelsea's 3-4-3 against Crystal Palace's 4-4-2. So first, we're going to break down Tuchel's overall attacking approach, break down where Palace went wrong, and then focus on how Havertz was able to dominate the game. So starting from the back, Chelsea already have a 3v2 advantage against the Palace forwards. Jorginho and Kovacic are stuck in the middle of the pitch, but they could often drop off deeper into the back line to get on the ball, and Kovacic often shifts into an inside left position to receive possession. The main focus for Chelsea here is to get Hudson-Odoi and Chilwell to push forward, as Palace do look to adopt a narrow 4-4-2 with the wide players tucking in. And that means that Pulisic and Mount did have to adopt central positions as well. Mount would often drop deeper to check into the ball, make runs in behind Van Aanholt when he was pulled out by Hudson-Odoi, or he would make runs in the Van Aanholt's Cahill gap to allow Hudson-Odoi more space down the right touchline. Meanwhile, over on the left-hand side, Pulisic could also drop off deeper to check into the ball, but he was often making runs in and across Ward to break in behind, and that allowed Chilwell space to push forward. Havertz was also likely to drop off deeper to check into the ball to drag out the center backs, but he was also willing to make runs across the center backs to break in behind if Chelsea wanted to go long. Therefore, when you focus on Palace's shape, they should have been able to cope with Chelsea's overall attacking threat. You could have, for instance, Zaha stepping into the path of Azpilicueta but blocking off the passing lane into Jorginho, and then have Benteke shift across to Christensen and vice versa. If you have Benteke shifting out to Rudiger, Zaha could stick towards Christensen with Benteke blocking off the passing lane into Kovacic. And even if they wanted to allow Christensen on the ball, then they could have Benteke and Zaha ready to step out to the wide center backs, but blocking off the lane into Jorginho and Kovacic. Another option for Palace would be to have Zaha and Benteke allowing the center backs to push forward and then blocking off the passing lane into Jorginho and Kovacic. It would ultimately allow them to box in the Chelsea midfield duo, as Milivojevic and Riedewald would be able to step forward to close down the central midfielders if Zaha and Benteke were bypassed. That means that the fullbacks would deal with the movement of Mount and Pulisic, Eze and Ayew could track the movement of Chilwell and Hudson-Odoi, and then that would leave the center backs to deal with Kai Havertz. Ultimately, there were two big issues that Palace's overall shape encountered, and Tuchel's tactics exploited it. One was the fact that they did have Jorginho and Kovacic dropping off deeper, and when Zaha and Benteke were looking to block off passing lanes or apply pressure, the Palace midfield bank was sitting off deeper. So technically you have a 5v2 in Chelsea's overall build-up play, and that often allowed passing lanes into Jorginho and Kovacic, and they weren't pressed, so they were able to pick out positive passes. It was often Kovacic shifting to the right of Benteke to get into that inside left position with Jorginho sitting in between the strikers. And if they were pulled out to, for instance, Zaha stepping to Azpilicueta, that leaves a huge gap for Jorginho to get the ball. Besides that, Jorginho would be shifting out towards Zaha's left, and with Milivojevic and Riedewald not stepping forward, then Chelsea were able to easily get the ball into their central midfielders, and they were able to pick out Havertz, Mount, and Pulisic dropping into pockets of space or breaking in behind. The other issue that Palace encountered was that Chelsea were able to quickly facilitate diagonal switches out to the wingbacks. It's due to the overall positioning of the Palace midfield bank, specifically Eze and Ayew, who were tucked in narrow, and with Jorginho and Kovacic being able to easily get on the ball due to their 5v2 pentagonal overload in their first phase of build-up play. When Jorginho and Kovacic got on the ball, they instantly looked to switch balls out to Hudson-Odoi, as Mount and Pulisic were able to occupy the fullbacks. Here you could see Chilwell on the ball pulling out Ward towards the halfway line, and Kovacic checking towards Chilwell to receive possession just ahead of Ayew. It was Chelsea's front three that caused Palace's backline the most problems. While Pulisic and Mount both had very good games, it was Havertz's movement that really disrupted them. His ability to drop deep, shift out into the wider areas into space behind the fullbacks to combine with his teammates, and make runs in behind Kouyaté and Cahill that resulted in some of Chelsea's best attacking moves. Here you can see Kovacic on the ball ahead of the midfield bank with no pressure applied. Hudson-Odoi looking to break behind Van Aanholt, but look at Havertz beginning to make a move across Cahill. When Kovacic clips the ball over the top, Havertz receives the ball with his first touch in left half space across the center back, but the issue that he encounters here is that he's unable to flick it across Cahill, who does well to clear danger. Here you could see Mount dropping off the ball to Kovacic ahead of the midfield bank, with Havertz dropping off into a pocket of space between Riedewald and Milivojevic. When Kovacic drops the ball into Havertz, he instantly plays it back to Kovacic, who shifts it to Pulisic, but look at Havertz's movement in between that gap now. He's between Milivojevic and Eze, and when Pulisic drops it back to Jorginho, that's where you end up seeing Havertz making the run in between Van Aanholt and Cahill in behind the defense, and that's when Jorginho lifts the ball over the Palace backline into Havertz, who this time brings it down with his first touch. But unlike the first attempt, he's able to flick the ball over the Palace left back and force a key save out of the keeper. In the build-up to Chelsea's opener, it's Havertz and Mount applying pressure on Eze, who did receive the Cahill clearance, and it's Havertz who's able to step in and apply pressure on the Palace wide player to win the ball. What Havertz does next is very important, because he's able to play the ball back to his teammate, but look at the position that he drifts into to look to receive the ball once again. Havertz ends up finding a gap between Riedewald and Eze, and Hudson-Odoi is able to split the Palace duo, and once he turns towards goal, then he has an option. He can either look to take on Cahill or play a square ball into Pulisic. Because Cahill isn't stepping tight to apply pressure, he puts the ball onto his left foot and puts Chelsea ahead. In the build-up to Chelsea's second goal, Havertz identifies the overload with Chilwell against Ward, but focus on Ayew and Kouyaté, who should be tracking his movement. Chilwell ends up poking the ball across the right back for Havertz, and while Havertz's movement does drag out Kouyaté and Ayew, they now leave Pulisic free in the box. Havertz identifies that threat and he pulls the ball back across both Palace players for Pulisic, and it now forces Cahill and Riedewald to get across, but unfortunately they're unable to stop Pulisic's threat and he ends up putting Chelsea up 2-0. Palace eventually did shift to a 4-5-1 out of possession, and while it should have improved their overall ability to disrupt Chelsea's build-up play, we still witnessed Havertz get into good positions, because when you look at how Palace should have approached the game, they should have been having the wider players closing out the wide center backs, with Benteke ahead of Zouma, the shuttler stepping out to Kovacic and Jorginho, and then Milivojevic dealing with Havertz or the movement of Mount and Pulisic into pockets of space between the lines. That does leave the fullbacks against the wingbacks, but if the fullbacks push higher up the pitch to close down the wingbacks, it ensures that Hudson-Odoi and Chilwell can't run at them. It does ultimately leave you 3v3 at the back, but for instance, if Havertz drops off and Milivojevic picks him up, then the center backs deal with Pulisic and Mount. Or if you have Mount dropping into that pocket of space, one of the center backs could deal with Havertz, and then Kouyaté could deal with Pulisic. Nevertheless, Palace's biggest issue was that they weren't applying that pressure, and they were still dropping off into that 4-5-1. Kovacic and Jorginho were able to get on the ball. Hudson-Odoi was now able to run beyond Zaha, who didn't have any intention of tracking him back, and Havertz was able to make those runs in behind the defense and still pop up into the midfield zone. Here you can see Jorginho on the ball with no pressure applied, and he's able to take out all three Palace midfielders for Havertz, dropping off into the halfway circle unmarked. When Havertz receives the ball, he instantly turns and he locates Mount, looking to run off Van Aanholt to break in behind the Palace high line. When Havertz shifts the ball out to Mason Mount, what you end up seeing is that Mount is able to carry the ball down the right channel, with Hudson-Odoi making an overlapping run. That's where you see Havertz's movement, and you can focus on him setting himself to make a run in between the center backs. When Mount takes on Van Aanholt, he has that 2v1 overload, but look at Havertz already focusing on making a run across Kouyaté. When Mount slides the ball to Hudson-Odoi, he instantly delivers a first-time ball for Havertz, expecting him to be at the edge of the 6-yard box, but he ends up nodding his header wide of the net. And if we look to one final example, you could witness Kovacic receiving the ball in the halfway circle unmarked, with Pulisic dropping deeper and Havertz occupying Kouyaté. Kovacic ends up playing the ball to Pulisic, who's able to turn towards goal to run at Kouyaté because no one picks him up. But look at Havertz instantly identifying the space, and he makes a run across Cahill in behind Kouyaté. Pulisic pokes the ball across the center back, and it allows Havertz to fire a low effort on goal that he should have scored. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.